Hello USC Sumter community and esports fans. My name is Brad Rogers and I'm here today to commentate on the Fire Ants' first official esports team competition. I'm joined today by my good buddy Kris Weissmann, the USC Sumter Student Life Director and Esports Coordinator. How are you doing today, Kris?
Pretty good, Brad.
That's awesome. So what are we going to get into today?
Today we're going to talk about the esports program here at USC Sumter and take a look at some gameplay footage from our first competitive match.
Alright, well before we get into the game, do you think you could explain what esports is to our viewers?
Sure. Just in a nutshell, it's online competitive gaming. That's what esports is. There's esports hierarchy that's on a professional level. There's an amateur level. There's a collegiate level. It's the most popular sport you've never heard of, or non-sport, depending on who you ask. There's multiple game types that you can play. We play in what they call a MOBA, which is a multiplayer online battle arena. We play the most popular collegiate MOBA, League of Legends.
So now that our viewers have at least a basic idea of what esports is, let's shift focus to what our viewers are actually seeing right now. What's going on in the video?
In this video, we're going to kind of give an introduction to what's actually going on with the program, but at the same time, you're going to see the actual first real high competition match that USC Sumter has ever been involved in.
That sounds cool. That's good. Who did you guys play?
We actually played in a random draw amongst over 100 teams. I believe we ended up playing East Carolina University.
Oh, that's cool. So it was a random draw, you said, and what was the actual championship called?
It's actually called the NACC, which is the North American Collegiate Championship. We were basically trying to compete with 300 schools to become the top 8 in our specific region. It's broken up into 4 regions in North America, and the top 32 teams get to compete throughout a season and go to the championship. But right now we're in the qualifier stage where we were trying to move on to try to be one of those top seeds.
Alright, so here we see the champion select screen. We're going to be playing on Summoner's Rift in a classic 5v5 match. During this process, players are able to ban, pick, or trade champions. So Kris, you think you could explain that in more detail?
Sure. So basically there's 3 phases here in the champion select process. In the first phase you have banning, which basically each team can ban 3 champions. And when they ban 3 champions, they're kind of trying to pick either champions that they don't want to play against, champions that are really good right now in the specific game, or champions that, maybe they know the other team is good with that they might want not to have to go against. And then after that phase, there's the pick phase. And in the pick phase, each champion, or each player, picks a champion based on who they want to play as in the match. However, it's staggered when it's picking, so there's a little bit of a strategic pattern there. One team will pick a couple champions and then it'll phase over to the other team and they'll pick a champion, and be strategic on who you want to pick against and kind of try to hide your hand, so to speak. And then in the third phase you have the trading phase, which is another section where you can kind of pick early in the pick process so that you can get a champion before maybe the other team, and then you can trade it down to a person that maybe was picking later. That way you can kind of maneuver around who gets who and who's going up against who.
Right, so it's a lot more complicated of a process than it seems.
Definitely. And I mean, there's a lot more to it, and we could explain even more in detail, but for time's sake, we can move on into the video, and then, we can maybe talk about some things as we go there.
Absolutely. So now we're in game. Keep in mind, since we are spectating, the camera will be bouncing around where the most action is taking place, rather than on individual players. Here we see champions spawning in. Champions spawn with a specific amount of gold, which they use to purchase items that will boost their stats in-game. Now players get gold by farming, which means killing creeps, which are the small enemies on the map. They can also get gold by killing or assisting in killing enemy champions. Now before we talk about the champions, let's take a second to explain to our viewers what exactly is happening on screen. On the right and the left sides, you see champions and their associated players' summoner name. USC Sumter's players are on the right, with ECU's players on the left. At the top of the screen in the middle, there is a kill counter for both teams. USC Sumter will be shown as the red team. The other counters are gold and objective counters, with the latter being towards the edge. The objective counters keep track of all towers destroyed and all dragons killed. At the bottom right, you can see the minimap, which shows the 3 primary lanes and where all towers, players, and the bases are. The objective of the game is to destroy the enemy's base, which is basically the Nexus. In order to get to the Nexus, you must destroy the towers in each lane or whichever lane is targeted by the team. Now, of course, it's in a player's best interest to also protect their own towers during the game. So, what do we know about ECU and USC Sumter in this matchup, Kris?
First off, we know that it was always going to be somewhat of a hard test for USC Sumter in their first match. We happened to draw ECU and their A team pretty much. They're a pretty good team. When you look at ranks in this game, you have ranks that go from bronze all the way up to challenger. It goes bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, master, challenger. And that shows the person's skill level or just how much they've played together as a team, things of that nature. In this matchup, we were facing players that were ranging from gold all the way up to diamond. And on USC Sumter's team, we were silver to gold. So there was already somewhat of a unbalanced system there in play, but it was just, luck of the draw for us.
Well, and didn't ECU actually get further along in the tournament as well?
They did. They've been playing together for a couple of years, which is already an advantage over our group because we had only been playing together for about 2 months. It was, this is a brand new program. We're in our infancy stage, so to speak. And so the draw that we got with ECU, they've already played in last year's qualifier. As well as this year's qualifier. They happened to go pretty deep into this qualifier, and last year they went pretty deep into the qualifier as well. So we were already facing a juggernaut right off the bat.
Yeah, so they're definitely not new to the game.
Definitely not.
Well, let's pause here for just a moment. Right now, we're looking at the bot lane, which is also known as the bottom lane. We have on ECU side Dejin, who's playing as Callista in an ADC role, who's backed up by Changlei Quad playing as Nautilus, who is also in a support role.
Right.
And on USC Sumter side, we have Rocket Prinny, who's playing as Tristana in an ADC role, and Killer Cats, who's playing as Bard in a support role. So let's continue the video. And Kris, will you explain bot lane and its associated roles?
Right, so we have the ADC and the support who work in tandem together in the bot lane. First, you have an ADC who puts out a lot of damage late game, but not so much at the beginning of the game. And also they're a squishy character, which means that they can be killed very quickly. Whereas the support character doesn't really farm as well. So they match up really well with a character like an ADC who does farm really well to be there to basically keep them alive and help support them. Their overall goal as a support is to keep the ADC alive and carry them on to the late game. So they'll work in tandem to try to kill the other team's ADC and then push turret, which would be push their lane, do things of that nature before they start rotating to other areas in the game.
Now that we have a basic understanding of bot lane, let's pause here at top lane. We can see ECU's Sepulgrave playing as Aurelia and Blue Poker Kid playing as Gangplank, both in top lane roles. With that being said, will you explain top lane for us, Kris?
So in top lane, it's a little bit different than the bot lane that we just showed. In the bot lane, it's 2v2. In the top lane, it's a solo lane, so you have a 1v1 situation going on up there. Obviously, they're trying to push in the lane to take the turret from each other. Also, they're trying to build up for, mid-game to late-game push, get a little tankier, a little meatier with their health, and maybe get some damage going on. With that being said, they are a little more of a tankier champion than, say, what we saw in bot lane.
So, for those of us who don't know, unlike a support or ADC character, a tank can soak a lot of damage, right?
Right. Well, some supports can soak up a lot of damage. That's what they're good for, to keep the ADC alive. But in the top lane, they want to soak up damage, but also be able to put out some damage as it goes on.
Okay, right, I see.
Usually, if they get any help, it's going to come from the jungler, especially early game. Later in game, you might see some rotation towards their way. What they want to do is just try to maintain lane, don't lose their turret, that kind of stuff.
So it's important to maintain lane unless you need to go back to get items or to heal, right?
Right. For the purpose of the video, we're looking at the basic gameplay in lane. So we don't want to make it too complicated. We can talk about a lot of strategies, but for what we're trying to show here, we're just kind of giving you a heads up of who's playing who, in what roles, that kind of stuff. Also, just kind of showcasing our first match as a collegiate esports program.
That's one of my favorite things about League. There's so much under the hood, despite it looking so simple at face value. Transitioning to mid, let's pause here. On the left, we have ECU's YFan92 playing as Twisted Fate, and on the right, we have USC Sumter's Bermuda Neo as Lissandra. So please tell us more about the mid lane, Kris.
Alright, so the mid lane is a very interesting lane. It's also a solo lane like top lane. Although in the mid lane we have champions that are AP champions, so they're ability power champions, versus like AD, attack damage, in the bot lane. Normally we have mages in mid lane, but there also are some assassins or melee type champions that'll also play mid lane. Mid lane can be kind of tricky because not only is it the shortest distance between one enemy nexus to the other, so that the minions spawn and come faster, but also you have a lot of different angles that enemies could potentially come in from different sides. So they're susceptible to a lot of ganks, so you have to be very aware of what's going on at all times around you.
So it seems that you would want someone who can handle pressure very well and also has great situational and map awareness to play mid.
That's a good way to look at it, Brad, because mid lane can be a very complex lane. It's one of the most difficult lanes.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. The next position I'd like to talk about is actually the jungler position. If you look at the bottom right towards the minimap, you can see the areas that constitute the jungle, essentially the gray areas in between the three lanes. In this area, a jungler will actually take advantage of the lack of line of sight to either aid allies or hamper opponents. Now in the jungle, it's not just safe passage. There are monsters and creeps that are inside of the jungle that can be farmed for either gold or experience. There are tougher enemies as well, like the dragon or the baron, which provide buffs as well as some other things we'll talk about later. You can also find the red and blue buffs both within the jungle, and again, we'll go into more detail about that later. It should be noted that a jungler can make or break a team. And perfect timing, because here is USC Sumter's jungler. Sumter's jungler is Dead Shields, who is playing as Elise. Essentially what you're seeing is Dead Shields has taken advantage of Sepulchre Grave, who's pushed up towards the tower, leaving themselves vulnerable for a gank.
Right, and the gank didn't quite work out like they wanted it to. They were able to get some good damage in on Sepulchre Grave, but ultimately they weren't able to get the kill. However, it did force Sepulchre Grave back to base. If you see the little blue circle on the minimap, it shows that she's going back to base. It was able to free up some space for Blue Poker Kid up there and almost allow him a chance to go back, but ultimately he misses his window.
Yeah, he looks pretty low in that situation, so I imagine it's going to cost him later.
Most likely it will.
Alright, so let's take a look at ECU's jungler, Dr. Ouchie. Dr. Ouchie is actually playing as Lee Sin, and he's currently rotating through the jungle. We'll see him in more plays a little later. And with that, we've essentially explained the basics of the match, including the players, their champions, and their associated roles, as well as giving you a basic understanding of how League of Legends works.
Okay, so since we've kind of covered the basics here, from here on out we'll just talk about certain plays that are going on during the game.
Right, as they happen. And I was kind of hoping that I could still ask you a few more questions about the esports program, Kris.
Okay, that seems like a good way to finish up the video.
Awesome. So the first question I had is, how is the esports program actually classified? Is it just a group of students who get together and play, or is it an official student organization?
Definitely a good question, Brad. It's actually an official organization that the university sponsors. It's not just a group of students that get together and just play a game. It's literally something that the university is behind 100% and supports the students in their behavior, just like an athletic team on our campus. It's classified as a club sport right now on our campus. Although in contrast, when you look at other campuses around the United States, some campuses have just group of students that get together and start a team together and then enter into tournaments, where you also have some other campuses who have already clarified their esports programs as varsity sports on their campus as well. They actually provide scholarships and all different types of things like that, just like other athletic sports.
So there's definitely room to grow. It's not quite a full-blown varsity sport, but it's definitely much bigger than just a regular student organization.
Right, and there's definitely room to grow as we move forward. So shifting focus back to the video, Brad, this is kind of a turning point in the game. The other team's already up by about 4,000 gold, which is a pretty significant amount. Blue Poker Kid's right now fighting under his turret 4v1, which is going to be tough either way. He's going to get one of them here, but ultimately it's still too much for him to handle by himself.
Absolutely, a 4v1 in any scenario is pretty much a bad thing. Just so you guys know, that gold difference is actually a pretty big deal. The more gold a team has, the more items they can buy that buff their stats. With that in mind, it's in a team's best interest to try to get as much gold as possible so that they can have better items.
Right, Brad. That's a pretty simple way of looking at it. As we're looking right now, Blue Poker Kid actually gets that kill on Supple Crave. So we're not down and out, but they definitely still have that gold lead on us. It is important to note here that this was our first competitive match as a group. Our players had only been playing together for about 2 months or so, and literally we picked out, or got a random draw with the pick, the ECU team, which is actually a pretty good team. Like we said earlier in the video, that they were pretty good not only this year but last year, and they've been playing together for some time. So it kind of shows as the game goes on here how they're kind of working together a little more maybe than our group, and it's just the learning curve of playing together on a regular basis. So unfortunately this game doesn't quite end up how we want it to be, but it was definitely a good test, a good experience for the group, so that they can gear up and learn from this process and bring it to their next competitive gameplay, which we actually are going to have in a season coming up soon.
And it's a completely different atmosphere stepping into the esports room now and really seeing how USC Sumter's team connects as they've played together, they've trained together, as opposed to looking at it when this game was initially shot 2 or 3 months ago. So it's definitely a huge change.
Right, and that's definitely what we want people to see. We want to see the change and the growth as the program gets, older, more mature, and also as the players get better and better and start to improve. And I think people will start to see that for sure. I know I've seen it as, basically the coordinator of esports. I've seen the players grow from, 2-3 months ago till now. It's definitely different, and I think it'll pay off throughout our season as we get more and more experience.
Absolutely, Chris. I see what you mean. And I think people are going to get really excited as the program grows. I also want to point out to the viewers that the first dragon was just slain by ECU. This shows that the momentum is starting to shift in the game. Also, on screen, it shows that a USC Sumter turret has fallen at top lane. Now that we see the game is starting to turn, we'll let the viewers watch what unfolds while we discuss some of the finer details of the esports program.
Alright, so what else do you have for me, Brad?
Well, I was curious about esports at USC Sumter being a club sport. How serious is it being taken on campus?
Well, it's a brand new program, but it's being taken serious in the sense that the administration takes it seriously. They want to see it do well as myself as the coordinator. We definitely want to see it do well. We still have the same serious aspect as the other athletic teams on campus, as in, the students have to meet certain GPA requirements. They have to go to study hall. They have those kind of, things that they have to maintain. Of course, if they don't, then, there's issues that may arise academically, things like that as far as discipline goes. And then, of course, they're held to a little bit of a higher standard to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do on campus. And, I think more people, as they learn about it, will take it more seriously in the sense that, they actually know what it is and how it's affecting the campus.
Well, it's good to see that the campus is actually fully behind it, though. I know starting a new sport is never an easy thing, and especially with esports and how quickly it's growing, it seems to me that it's a great idea to go ahead and hop on it right now while it's still young and it's still being formed. Looking back at the game, we can really see that momentum has completely shifted at this point. ECU has about 25,000 gold, whereas USC Sumter has 17,000. We can also see that the kill counter shows ECU has 8 and USC Sumter has 4. However, it should be noted that ECU has also brought down 3 towers and killed 1 dragon, whereas USC Sumter at this point has not been able to.
Right, that momentum that we were talking about earlier is really carried over and continued to increase. They basically have taken all our tier 1 towers in each lane, which, pushes them closer and closer to our base and our nexus. As you see here, they're taking ECU, just took the blue buff, which basically gives a mana buff to the champion that collects that. So, we're trying our best to push out our lanes and things of that nature. But like we said before, things are just not quite pushing our way in this game, and I think you see that with ECU being able to kind of take advantage of everything.
Right, I see what you mean.
Right there, Supple Crave just pretty easily killed Blue Poker Kid, but we were able to snag a bot lane turret. We had 4 players go down there and take one of the turrets at that time. So that was a good move on our part.
Absolutely, and even if the game isn't going the way we'd like, there were definitely some positives to be taken away from the game, and it has made for some good learning experiences. So we've talked a lot about the actual esports program and, the various details about it, but we haven't talked a lot about the actual team or the players. So, just out of curiosity, about how many players are there and how do they feel about the program?
So we have about 10 players right now, and that's a good number because they can kind of mix it up between each other competitively, and we can kind of get a different tier level as far as, like an A team, B team type thing. And they're all really excited about the program. It was something that, they were all really jumping on board for. They were glad to be a part of, like the first time thing, kind of, pave the way for the next couple years of players that might come and play.
Well, it's definitely great to know that everyone seems to be supporting the program, and it's going to be exciting watching the program grow. Thanks for taking the time to let me ask you some questions, Kris.
No problem, Brad. Glad to be here. Glad to do it. Glad to spread the word about the esports program. We're very happy and excited about the support that we have so far, and we just look forward to the growth and everything just moving forward from here.
If you want to know more about the USC Sumter Esports program, or you'd like to stay up to date on what's going on with the team, check the links in the description. And with that, my name is Bradley Rogers with the USC Sumter Esports coordinator, Kris Weissmann, and we'll see you next time.